Então vou falar.
Hey everyone, good morning. While people are pouring in, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to come closer. I know that we're under a pandemic, we need to stay separated, but do come a little bit closer to the stage and make yourselves at home, make yourself comfortable. We have a very promising event today, and I just want to like to make it clear that I like to keep things warm, to have people close by, so feel free to sit close. And it's nice to see you here after a 10-day trip. And I myself am pooped, to say the least. I I was just thinking to myself when I woke up this morning, what am I actually going to wear this morning? And Gustavo, are there more people coming in, or is this it? Are we ready to go? But anyway, I probably repeat this several times throughout the event, but let's make it clear that it's very important that you wear masks throughout the day. People won't be wearing masks on the stage, but that shouldn't be the example or the models we follow. But we're going to try to respect social distancing as much as possible throughout the proceeding of the event. But let's try to keep those masks on throughout the duration, and and I think that should do it for our safety share. But as far as the social distancing goes, do s- try to leave a gap in between participants, unless you're a part of a family or you live together. And also, the bathrooms are found right outside this auditorium on the right hand side, and lunch will take place at 12:30 Brazil time, most likely, give or take a few minutes. And so again, lunch at 12:30. We have about an hour and a half for us to grab a bite, and I'm going to try to be very strict here with time, try to be as punctual as possible. But should there be the need to delay lunch by a low extent, I will have to do that. And there are a lot of people we want to invite to the stage. Since there's so many people here, so many participants here on the stage, since we have that large number of speakers, we're not going to receive questions from the stage. In the afternoon session, yes, of course, we're going to have a Q&A session, but we do have some post-it notes on the outside, so feel free to write down your questions and post down some notes. Oh, oh, my alarm just rang here on my phone, letting me know that the meeting should have started, but we have started. But anyway, as I was saying, we have the post-it notes outside where you can make suggestions, comments, and ask questions. And throughout the course of the day, we are undergoing an assessment process, and we're going to have our own process here where you will be able to interact. But anyway, this is the best we can do at this moment, and of course, we're going to talk about research and report that will be shared with our colleagues. And despite the fact that we printed everything, it looks all nice and neat and all, this is still a draft. And with for all the people who collaborated in the research, I think we have some critics, some friends who are along with us today, who are going to help us decide whether or not this is what we want to convey. If there's something that needs to be changed. So do not think this is set on stone, as this is still very much malleable. This is still an ongoing process. It's undergoing revision, and do feel free to reflect upon that throughout the day. We do very much want your participation for us to improve, refine it, and issue the final report right around the end of Carnival or March next year. So there's still time for us to provide our final statements or final commitments. Uh, I am one of the researchers from Queen Mary Research, Queen's Mary University there. I believe a lot of you have participated in that research, and you do know that This was done with data from 6 different organizations, right from this very iron quadrangle in the state of Minas Gerais, with the Inhotim Institute, who chose those 5 institutes and communities to help participate in these research. So we're very much thankful for all who participated, and we're going to have time to talk about each and every one of these organizations. I myself am very grateful because I spent the last 10 days visiting all these different organizations and getting to know our artists, face to face, in person. Yeah, I think it's clear from my face that I spent the last 10 days, going from here to there nonstop, and, being there face to face, getting to know you up close and personal. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to thank you here for those visitations. They were quite fruitful. So thank you once again very much from the bottom of my heart for this Minas Gerais hospitality. And also, I'd like to say that this research was financed by the British government through the Ministry of Culture, which has the official name is Pop and Culture, something at DC. The Department of Culture, Media, Sports is something else that Lucas is going to talk about. We are, in fact, very grateful that Lucas Brum from the General Council is going to present the British Council here, since the British Council or British government has been supporting this research. And another supporter or sponsor, financial sponsor of this research is the British Government Research Council, who's also been supporting numerous initiatives throughout Brazil and abroad, and addressing this type of subject. And Lucas is going to talk about that. But anyway, it is with enormous joy that I'm going to now invite Antonio Grassi to provide the official opening of the event, the official welcome, so to speak. And also myself and Grassi have worked quite extensively together in numerous occasions for events for the development of culture and theater throughout several decades, if I may add. And now here we are in 2021 to be right next to Antonio Grassi, right here in this very Inhotim Institute, despite the fact that Grassi is far from us. He is very much present in all this work we have developed throughout this period. So, Antonio Grassi, are you here with us? Let's see if this is working now. Well, how dramatic this is, that dramatic silence. Hey, Gustavo, do we have him? There he is.
Senor.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen. Well, Paul, I could not begin my speech without providing a quick reference to this crazy situation, which is this meeting here where we're meeting for the first time in Inhotim in completely inverted positions. I myself am in Europe right now, where you yourself were present many times when we met virtually, and now you are there in Inhotim, which is an enormous pleasure for me, to say the least. I'm positive a few hours in terms of the time zones, but also negative in terms of a few degrees. But anyway, it's a great pleasure to provide this welcome to everyone and to share this interesting work that we have provided. And by the way, this is fruit of the labor of about 10 months through a partnership. As Paul himself mentioned, this is a partnership which was very, very much important for Inhotim, because it came up at a moment when we were celebrating, or actually when we celebrated our 15 years of existence, and with that we elected as a main subject of that celebration our relation with our land. Therefore, that partnership came up at exactly the right time. And I'd like to thank People's Palace, particularly Paul, through this excellent partnership that we were able to provide, Angelo, Leandro, and everyone else who participated with us throughout this process. In the Casa Quilombe, right at the city of Brumadinho, our neighbors there from Marinhos, Ray Matuque, and the Sebastian Band, which is the musical band there of Romadinho, And that is a band, if I may add, that has something very specific, very unique when it comes to the recovery of their culture. And this is a band that was founded before the existence of the very municipality of Brumadinho. So that was quite an interesting endeavor there. And we also have the Carlos Drummond de Andrade Foundation from the city of Itabira. And as the name itself states, it is everything for for this partnership for the city of Itabira, and where we have this special interest in them throughout this partnership. And the Carlos Drummond de Andrade Cultural Foundation goes way well beyond the well-deserved reference to this great man of the Brazilian culture and Brazilian literature, who's Carlos Drummond de Andrade. And where they do some very they carry out some very interesting actions, and also the people from the backstage there in Nova Lima, who do some very important work there when it comes to the theater and reading as a source of inspiration over in the city of Nova Lima, and the institution at Nova Lima, who, aside from being a very important municipality in this work we've been running, they also bring about a very fundamental key aspect there, which joins certain childhoods and adolescences, and which is again a very interesting work. These were fundamental partners. Ching had only was only one link of that chain, if you will, and we don't have a single protagonist there, but rather we are a chain which is stronger together, not only on a state level, but also in terms of what we can provide to the world. And I also would like to say that I'm speaking here not in person, but remotely, because I'm now performing a new role within Ching, which is related to this international endeavor we're running, not only in terms of the international catchment, but also as far as the relation goes with other institutions. And also I'd like to add that this work came about from a very interesting sequence of events throughout this project, this partnership that we built throughout the year of 2021 with the People's Palace, and further developing our relationship with institutions within our area. And by that I mean this work that involves the British government, which is something that we not only do we need to strengthen as a partnership, but also we need to think about the fact that this seminar won't really be concluded, as this is not a full stop, the period to this process, but rather the beginning of a new process, or a new page, as it were, of a new project, which is going to have further developments, not only the state of Minas Gerais, but also abroad within this whole trajectory we've been creating within this international presence, not only within Yoching, but through all the partnerships that the Yoching name may bring with it throughout this important work we've been conducting. I'd like to provide also a special thanks to the United Kingdom Embassy, our General Consul, Lucas Brown, and all of the participants within our agenda, and to say that most certainly we're going to have other developments here. We have already talked about the third dose of the vaccine, and here in Europe, they're already talking about the fourth dosage, or the fourth dose, and I believe that we're going to require several doses of this vaccine to the soul, which is this project and this work that we've been building internationally. And again, a great big hug to everyone. And do make the most of the day. We are all together at the end of this day, ultimately. Well, thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite Lucas, the General Consul from the United Kingdom, who is based right here in this very city of Belo Horizonte. Yeah, and by the way, we do have separate microphones for each participant, just to keep things safe. Feel free to pick it up on the table. Good morning, everyone. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to greet Antonio Grassi, Laura, who I just met. I in this very wonderful, wonderful place, and I'd also like to greet Paul and Gustavo for their fantastic work here, and all the other panelists who are going to talk to you here today. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible here, but I have 3 points that I'd like to go over. The first one being the relevance of the cultural projects and their legacy. The United Kingdom has historical roots in the state of Minas Gerais. Those of you who have been to Nova Lima have seen, or maybe they may not have noticed, but it's a great pleasure to get to know Lucas Marino here in this event. And the first British investment in Brazil was in the city of Nova Lima in a gold mine, which is still active to this day. If you look at the Anglican Church or the Villanova soccer team, or even the traditional cake, which they call keka here, which is based on the Christmas cake they have in the UK. So you can see that the British heritage is very much alive in the city of Nova Lima, and possibly some of you are not aware of it, but this in fact does need to be celebrated. And they even say that the slang here in Minas Gerais, where they say why, it came about from Mineiros imitating British people saying why. And this has yet to be confirmed, but I do have my strong beliefs that it is the case. So again, it's with great pleasure to be here once again through another partnership with the British Council and the state of Minas Gerais. And the second thing I like to cover is COP26 in last month. The United Kingdom hosted COP26 in Glasgow, where we reached some very important agreements with regards to adaptation and mitigation and referencing. And I like to say that no other state in Brazil, or possibly in Latin America, was as highlighted as the state as Minas Gerais. And I think all Mineiros, the residents of Minas Gerais, should be proud of that. And on top of the agreements we signed, we also heard many, many voices. We had programs with the youth and the civil society through the COP, and we also had thematic days with certain presidencies through on the subject of the gender, youth, and public empowerment. And through that, we also agreed that a new 10-year project was going to conduct actions in order to promote a greater engagement of youth on climate change, education, and public participation. And COP26 was where the United Kingdom really took on the presidency of this work, and this is something that just recently started. A third point I'd like to provide here today is a subject I cannot overlook, which is the tragedy or the tragic disaster in the city of Brumadinho. And my apologies if I am overstaying my time period here, but this is very important because I'll never forget the moment or the day I found out about that tragedy. And I imagine that most of you also have the same feelings. There was a similar tragedy that occurred in the United Kingdom where most people found out through the TV series The Crown, where in 1966 in the city of Aberfan in the country of Wales, a mine ended up collapsing and it killed 144 people, including 116 children. And the challenge of managing dams is a global one. However, the state of Minas Gerais finds itself within a greater challenge since it boasts of over 400 tailings dams within the state. Therefore, it's imperative that governments and the public authorities do include different communities and the third sector in order to increase the safety of tailings dams and their respective mines. And one of the most priority projects of the British Council here in the state of Minas Gerais is the support to an initiative led by the United Nations and a very large group of investors who are led by the Anglican Church in London in order to implement a rigorous standard on an international basis in order to provide safety, governance, and transparency for the management of tailings dams which is called the Global Industry Standards or Tailings Management, which is where I ended up running into AgriBoom and Angelica from AgriBoom within one of their events in 2019, actually 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And all of our events provide a diversity of participation. There's an international specialists from academia, from mining companies, and from the government itself. However, we always try to make a habit of including representatives from the community and NGOs, such as the movement of the afflicted parties from the dam break. And with that, we found the importance of international collaboration. And also, I'd like to reiterate the fact that this dam problem is a global one, and we need to work together in order to share not only best practices, but also technologies, and truly understand the lessons learned through past mistakes. I hope that this is a very productive event of great value, and I'm very happy to know that Paul's work is going to continue running in the state of Minas Gerais, so you can very much count on the support of the British Council, and thanks again. Thanks, Lucas, for providing that link between those different entities. It's very important, so thanks again. Also, I forgot to mention that the research that is being run here in the state of Minas Gerais through these 6 organizations is part of a program which is taking place in 9 different countries. And one of the things that we're planning to do next year is to show the research that is being done in other countries, which involves all who are affected by environmental risks in different regards, if you will, be they in the Pacific, in Asia, Africa, and in Europe, in Turkey, most specifically. And in next year, this research they're collaborating with is going to then be linked to these other communities, groups, and all artistic groups and cultural groups, in order to show how the world cultural heritage is being threatened by these changes that are taking place within the environment. So when we think about, Itabira, Nova Lima, or something, or be it a street right in here in Minas Gerais, how that's going to contribute to everyone, so that we can all think differently. When I say thinking, I'm talking about public initiatives, artistic measures, this whole discourse of that research builds, and when we're able to provide these interactional changes that Lucas brought up there. So thanks again, Lucas, for reminding us of that. Now we're moving on to the first session of the day. And it's unbelievable how we were able to put this together. But anyway, the way this day set up is into 3 different parts. And with that, we have 3 different panels. The first panel is why does this matter? Well, we're going to invite 2 very big names to talk about. Before we actually get to the research, we need to ask ourselves, why does this matter? Cultural heritage, within this whole scope of things that we're covering here. So why is that important? We're going to have simultaneous translation here, which is very nice here because we do have participants from London. And, that participant is going to speak in English. We have Leandro speaking Portuguese. And Leandro is a Brazilian who's living in Manchester. And, of course, he's going to speak in Portuguese. But so again, they're going to be talking about very hard things there. Feel free to make use of the translation or the interpretation devices, where you'll be able to understand things better. And if things are not working, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll replace the device momentarily. And now, Leandro Variaccio, professor of cultural economy from the University of Manchester. But however, when I met him, he was a professor from the University of Culture from Rio Grande do Sul in the city of Porto Alegre, where he's still conducting research with certain entities. And throughout 10 years, he was the consultant of the Ministry of Culture in the area of economy until the year of 2016. And along with Leandro, we are going to have Casques Behavior, who is the curator or historian of culture and speaker and conference provider in Britain. He's a great man. He presents incredible programs in British television about several areas, especially arts and cultures from diverse nature. He was executive director of strategy for the Arts Council in England. He led the diversity program from British Museum. He was the director of the National Museum of African Arts from the Smithsonian in the United States. And it was very nice that we were able to have him back in London to begin the new Victoria Museum in Albert in the east of London. So it's a pleasure to have him with us and to keep things rolling. We have Juliana Machado, who's the president of their fund throughout several years, not only here in the city of Minas Gerais, but also on a federal level. Who was a curator of culture at UNESCO between 2001 and 2012. She was our consultant throughout this project, and I was very happy to hear that she accepted the invitation for this project and who's been with us to this day. So Jurema Machado on the stage, Gus and Leandro on the screen. A round of applause for our guests. Leandro, over to you. Wait, there's no audio. We can't hear. Let's try to solve that issue. Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm here. So again, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. Unfortunately, I can't be in the state of Minas Gerais due to several reasons. But again, it is a pleasure to see this project reaching its final stage, because as was said in the beginning, this is still an organizational phase, as there's still some adjustments to be made. And with that, we're going to build an excellent report, I believe, throughout the coming months. And before moving the word to our wonderful, wonderful guests, I would like to talk a little bit more about this research that brought us here. Because as was said in the beginning, this project is being carried out at a front where other researchers and other universities and distinct countries throughout the world have been measuring risks to the environment and culture and our heritage, and their link with environmental disasters. And I believe that all of our work is quite efficient here, especially when it comes to understanding up to which point does art and culture introduce and develop matters. And with that, we had an external look and an internal look with the local intelligence, the artistic facets, which are very much important to this project. Wait, sorry. Is there some problem with my audio, or let me try to sort it out? Is it better now, or? Okay, good. Part, I don't know if you heard what I was saying there, but I heard my audio was quite poor, but now that we've solved that problem,
Hello, can you hear us now? Can you hear us? Back there. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Hello, can you hear me there? Well, wonderful, right? Uh, this sort of a hybrid meeting. Leandro, can you continue there? Can you hear us from here? Maybe not. Gustavo, may I continue with him or without him? What do you say? Yeah, that's the problem in the UK, right? It differs from state to state. Well, anyhow, I will go for sure. Leandro will be back, but was he going to talk to you? What's up? He said he was going to ask us a few questions. So I will improvise the questions here. Well, let's start with Juliana, please. I'm talking in Portuguese here. I apologize. Well, thank you very much. I loved your background there with this package in the back there. You know. Sabe por que que eu tenho esse pacote aqui? Now you have to put your phone. Now they have to put their earphones to listen to the translation. Go ahead. You can continue.
Gus, por que você tem esse
It's
pacote?
because
Por que os pacotes aí, Gas?
I just moved in.
É porque eu acabei de me mudar pra cá, sabe? Na verdade.
Having my everything I owned in storage for 2 years because of COVID, and I've moved back from Washington DC to London, and I still haven't. But
Great.
delighted to be home.
Ótimo. A gente está muito feliz de ter você de volta. Leandro, você está de volta com
That's great, excellent. We're happy to have you back. Leandro, you're back with us, so the floor is yours. Yes, I'm back. I apologize. We had a technical glitch here, but I guess now the sound is a lot better, right? Well, I'm not sure how far you could hear me, how far into the presentation, but I will. Well, basically, I will tell you that within this project specifically, we are looking at the risks that we still have to our cultural Brazilian heritage and environmental heritage in this region. But we're also very much concerned with the future. How do you look at the future? Well, producing qualified evidence so that we can see the art and culture not only from this view of maintenance of such wealth, right, and mitigating risks, but we also have to look at it as how to produce politics and guidelines that make this cultural heritage with relevant strategies for development from the human viewpoint as well as from the social and economical viewpoint. And as I tried to say before, I'm not sure if you could hear me because of the problems with the transmission. But anyhow, the idea is really together to create using local wisdom with artistic production locally and the creator of public policies there, that we can actually produce a critical mass that would take us and help us provide information, consistent information with data, so that public policies can be created based on this new economical matrix for that region. Of course, among other things, based in art, culture, and heritage, and and identity, of course, which is paramount there. And this is of an absolutely huge value. But this project, its goal is to try to estimate a little part, to try to understand a small part of this value from a joint effort with local wisdom, that is, and also with this to produce insights, insights into politics and narratives, and to produce new strategies. After all, at a time that is essential to come up with new strategies for local development. The pandemics we've had, the social and economical imbalance we have there. So it is fundamental to have these strategies, and these strategies go through understanding and in a qualified way the local values. So it is a great pleasure to welcome here among all the support, especially to have this Gus and Jurema on this panel. And basically, I thought about two basic topics to discuss here very freely. Of course, this is a chat, and feel free. We can think and reflect about these topics for sure. Unfortunately, we're not all in the same room, so we miss a little of that look in the eye and all the forms of body communication. But I am quite sure that the positive energy of our friends there from Minas Gerais will make up for all of this. Anyhow, the first topic that I thought about to discuss, actually to motivate a first round of reflection and discussion is the very concept of well-being. We work a lot in this project with the idea that the well-being is actually well-being is produced, that is, by a number of phenomena from the individual viewpoint as well as from the collective. And we understand that art and culture are huge components of human activities that generate well-being, that generate this, that have the capacity of meeting needs that are very, very basic to human beings, which are the needs of having an identity, the need to connecting oneself with values and symbols that belong to the way you see yourself. And culture is all of this. Culture and art, they produce new sense, and they stress senses that are already in existence, and they bring happiness. They bring this feeling, this feeling of belonging. And I wanted you to talk freely about this relationship, how you see, heritage preservation and building this new sense that says that development is much more than just increase revenue, or development goes much beyond than simply having an economic product from that, a financial product from that. So how can we have this drive towards development in a broader sense? Feel free, whoever wants to talk. Jurema, would you like to start, or Gus, whichever? It's hard for me to coordinate it from here, right? So what do you prefer? Well, maybe Gus. I yield the floor to Gus first. I get the ball rolling. Okay, Gus, floor is yours. Please, if you could start. Não tem o som dele aqui. Your mic's off, Gus. Gus, your mic is off. Not sure if you can hear me there, but your mic is off. We can't hear you from. I got it. Yes. Yes, it's on. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think this is the critical question. I mean, over this last 20 odd months of pandemic, we've all probably been kind of tested by feelings of isolation, of dislocation. And it has been culture, I think, which has really shown its importance as a mechanism for building cohesion, for drawing us together, for acting as a space within which we might find catharsis. And it's reminded us, particularly in the museum sector, of beyond all of the kind of metrics that we are kind of so invested in reporting, that there is this other area in which culture is enormously important in actually both monitoring and raising the well-being of communities. And I think post the pandemic, if there's anything that must come from this as a learning, it is the power, the need for us to actually gather together and actually to use culture and to find within culture a kind of very special catharsis that is integral to creativity and communion. And I think one of the lessons for us in the museum sector is that this is something that beyond the pandemic that we need to find the ways of investing in. And I'm very fortunate to be in a position that we are building a new museum. And one of the things that we want to do is to invest as we go forward in ways of drawing that opportunity of bringing people together, both in terms of conceiving ideas, but also in delivery.
Yes, Gus, thank you very much. I will move straight to Jurema for her comments, and then I'll come back for some reflections on this. Well, good morning, everyone. I have the privilege of being here today with you in person now, having Leandro and Gus there on the screen talking with us. But anyhow, many are the thoughts, many are the things. We are still living inside the eye of the storm. We haven't left it yet. Recently, I watched an interview from Krenak, Ayrton Krenak, I'm not sure if you saw it, in which he says that we in the Western world and educated to feel guilt all the time, feel guilty all the time. We have learned that we learn with suffering. That not necessarily we should learn from suffering. We can also learn from happiness, from the possibility of transformation. And he says this exactly talking about the COVID-19 epidemic, saying that it didn't come to teach, it came to kill. And we have to prepare ourselves to face these challenges, and which was very curious. On the one hand, it imposed on us an isolation, but at the same time, it helped us understand that all the solutions were in the collective. Although we were safe as possible, those who could, right, to be safe at home and isolated. But all the time we knew that the solution could only come from joining efforts in a cross-sectional way, not only territorially, but concerning all public policies, all the ways of relating to people, of truly breaking the economical differences, cultural differences, because that the solution should come from the collective. And more recently, we're seeing the last variant from COVID coming up from Africa with a certain ease. People close borders. Which is something that at the beginning of the pandemic was not done. Exactly when it was circulating through Europe, everyone was sort of afraid of and actually didn't know. We were all learning about it. And right now, at this, after 2 years of difficulties, people are still deciding, to close borders in a flash. But what does this production environment bring us? This way of being in the world, which is cultural activity. What does it tell us? Well, I thought it was very interesting to see in the study that the study done about the profile of the groups, how much is clear this need to exchange, to receive something from this cultural production and also to put it out there. And many groups said that one of the main concerns they had is the absence of the state, the lack of incentives from the state, from the government, and the lack of support, which is something that we noticed from all the different areas. The public healthcare system here in Brazil that many rejected became the big hero here in Brazil, in case of the pandemic and resisting the pandemic. It is curious because if we were somehow in the past, in recent years, let's say, we were taught that art is a manifestation of the individual, and it is something that is very much based on individuality and individual expression. All the resources right now, they move towards this concern with the collective, which is what we saw happening in among the different groups, of being in dialogue with other people and working together. I think the teachings and the learning, the day after, that is, of this entire process, will come from this idea of coming back to being together, to the collective. It is individual expression, individual creation, but on a plane, on an environment that means working together, of being together, that is. Well, thank you very much, Jurema, for these thoughts. Well, hearing you from me here, it is very clear. One thing for me is that today we have this need to rebuild the spaces of cultural activity after the pandemic, and this is something very important when we talk about a sustainable activity, the artistic activity being sustainable in a way that it can guarantee an alternative, that the artistic activity be an alternative, a very important alternative, I would say, to also preserve value, generating value, but also generating food, right, to be an economically relevant activity. And when we talk about a region where we have one type of economical activity prevailing, which is the case of the iron area of Minas Gerais, the area where this all happened. We have to increasingly have to think about new alternatives for culture to be economically sustainable. How do you see this in the post-pandemic, or even as Gus said, it is hard to talk about post-pandemic because we're still living the movements of pandemic. We are still in the wake of it. But how do you see the role of art and culture within this new system of production and consumption that comes up after this huge crisis we've been through and we're still going through, which has been the pandemic? Gus, if you would.
Seria ótimo.
I think one of the things that we must have all have learned is the power and the importance of communication in this period, and through that, I think the absolute integral importance of the arts. That it has been, I think, in this period, a reinvestment in digital communication, in social media, of those mechanisms becoming incredibly powerful in us reconnecting with the idea of community. But these new communities that have begun to develop within the digital sphere are generally ageographic, that we can feel as connected to people who might actually kind of live, reside, feel connected to other people on the other side of the planet. And I do think that has left us with a kind of legacy. As you say, we can't say that we're post-pandemic, but it has left us with an understanding of how locality can be elastic, of how we can actually build community in many different ways, how that there is the potential for us to now think about how we might engage in much more forceful ways in driving kind of connectivity, particularly um, 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 beyond borders and boundaries, in much more concerted ways. And I think that, for me, is really exciting. Pre-pandemic, the cultural sector was really invested, at least in Britain and in North America, in the places that I worked, in very kind of discrete, tight communities. What has happened through this period is us beginning to understand, particularly the needs of the young, many of the sorts of marginal communities who didn't come into our institutions, the understanding of how we might actually begin to build communities of interest that sit, that may be distributed across the globe. Those legacies are really powerful, both in terms of how we address our programming, but also in thinking about how we might actually go forward and actually begin to make communities of interest that are much more dynamic and much more diverse.
Muito obrigado.
Thanks very much, Gus. And now, Jurema? Yeah, when Gus was talking about the communities of interest there, that also makes me think about our ambitious role there, because when you think about it, we're telling ourselves here that culture is going to transform the vocation of an entire region. So if we look today at the fragility of the sector in itself, I don't know if you guys also were able to see the new IBGE data there, which stated that the sector lost about 700,000 jobs in the pandemic and ended up becoming the champion, so to speak, of informal jobs. And when you look at the sector, which was so drastically penalized from the circumstances, which even before was quite fragile as far as the organization and recognitions go from the very state we live in, from the rest of the economy. And this is going to be the sector, I believe, that's going to better leverage all these other innovations. I'm very much optimistic when I think about that, and especially when I think about a region such as the one we find ourselves in, the one where your work was produced and is very much carried out when it comes to arts and culture, where we were able to add value to specific matters there throughout the pandemic, especially when it comes to the threats of those dam breaks there, which are concrete facts and permanent threats, for the present and the future, because things haven't been 100% solved. So now we're going to say we're going to anchor ourselves to culture and change everything. Well, it's quite ambitious, but on the other hand, we do not see other sectors with such a capacity to act on these different matters of sociability, relations, organizations, in terms of society and these communities of interest, as Gus mentioned there. And we also need to act upon people's minds by opening them up to possibilities of choice. I think that this area here, the mining activities, is so determining and so secular. Something that comes from the very beginning of the occupation back in the 18th century, which has changed the different types of resources that were mined here. It started from gold and went to iron ore, and how it's so much rooted. It seems that people are born believing that their destiny is pretty much set. So if they're born in this area, it means that they need to adhere to this format, or this mold, or this way of living in this world, or this type of professional activity. And so since my destiny is set, I live in this area. My destiny has been predetermined. But in fact, our labor, our work here, may help us broaden that whole range of choices. Not to become an artist or to continue to be an artist, but to open up people's minds to other horizons and other possibilities. Time and time again, we go back to Gilberto Gil and the song where he says that the people know what they want, but they also want what they don't know. So we need to find out what we want and what we don't yet know or are aware of. So I think that your work is quite transformative when it comes to those matters. And And it's very much realized through the groups, through the collective, and through this hearing of the, the core of the emotional and affections, and which is very much found within these human groups, a society, which is specifically here in this very place, here and now. Yeah, thanks very much, Jurema. Not just you, but also Gus, brought about a lot of light. You shed a lot of light into this matter. And also like to reiterate one specific aspect here, which is the fact that I myself, as an economist, I believe that your statement there, or rather, that difficulty that you had there in the economic sector, the division of public policies and the things that have been developed very recently, that is a fact. However, I do think that little by little, as a society, I think we can think about new narratives, if you will. And what you maybe ask yourselves, what are these new narratives? When we're talking about, if we just keep talking about quantitative aspects, the GDP or growth, or elevating the economic prospects of an area, we end up forgetting all the pluralism, the culture, and everything else intertwined within culture that could further leverage that. And I think what we need to do is to take a leap in terms of the conception of what development actually is as a society. And a lot of times this is not necessarily associated to the hard economic growth or the GDP or any type of job or employment, but rather it's associated to thinking about more structuring issues. And I think a project such as this one, within a discussion such as the one we find ourselves in, that you ever so brilliantly conduct, this does in fact help to aggregate or add value, in a sense that society will be able to then further stimulate that type of thinking. In other words, what do we need to do in order to further develop ourselves? And that most certainly will start to influence politicians, especially those that deserve being called politicians, the true politicians. And it's also going to influence everything around us. Again, I'm very much happy with our discussion, and unfortunately we're out of time. We have a very full agenda today, and I would like to just ask you to provide your final statements, and I would bid my adieu. And I do hope that we can continue with the central debate within the scope of this project. And hopefully you'll be available to continue discussing the results of this project with us, as well as the concepts that we are creating over the course of this fantastic journey. So, Gus, if you may provide us with your final statements, then we'll wrap up from there. Olha, dos legados, eu diria, desse período
will be that as we are crafting a new museum in London, a new V&A East, and this will be a space within which we will reconsider many of the sorts of narratives that would be traditionally considered by a material culture museum, but through a lens of what we've learnt over this last 2 years. It will be a collection centre that will hold more than 250,000 objects and 1,000 archives. But more critically, it will be a space that we hope will hold the interpretive understanding of many thousands of people. That what we want this to be is a different kind of museum that is built in partnership with its communities and will be understood through a lens of understanding of all of the interpretation that will come from working with the communities that surround us. This is one of the key legacies of this period, of us actually thinking that we cannot deliver a museum in the 21st century which is not in partnership with our communities, that doesn't learn from our communities. So the sorts of things that you are gathering to consider today are the critical things for museums to be thinking about. And the sorts of drives and initiatives that you feel are important are the things which I get a sense are the key considerations for the museum sector. So I will be really fascinated to see what comes out of this 2 days. And, I give you all of my support, and I really kind of look forward to learning from what comes out of this very important endeavor.
Na verdade, o Gus fala aqui dos museus.
Yeah, in fact, when Gus talks about the capacity for interpretation on behalf of museums in a presentation of something which perhaps a bit more unilateral or single-dimensional, perhaps should be something that comes and goes, an exchange of ideas, two-sided endeavor. And I think that very few areas that have that capacity of demonstrating that fusion of arts and culture and environment, such as the one we find ourselves in. And this is something which also crosses through history. All the artists that this land provided, they also drank from that source. They very much interact with the environment, therefore to choose the color palette of the painters, or even the materials they picked for their sculptures, or the shapes they provided for their sculptures. There is, in fact, very much a hub there, or a link between the land and the capacity for organization from the communities themselves. So when I talk about this transformative power of change there, it's not just about producing GDP on a large scale and competing with other sectors in terms of jobs and resources or economic products, but rather to produce, it's more of a matter of producing transformation in people's lives and relations between people and the people with their land, the space they live in. I also see this with a lot of optimism, and I think that we need to be brave enough to start from the smaller transformations and demanding or require greater changes, something with a lot more solidarity and from a greater human perspective than what we have today. Thanks again. Yes, thanks again to everyone, Leandro, Gus, Jurema. And before Gus leaves, I'd just like to say that if you are interested in the things that Gus spoke about, which I myself find quite exhilarating, we do have a website in Portuguese talking about one drum, which is the story of a drum or the sounds of the drum with regards to museums. And Igor provided us that talk in the Arts Museum in Rio about 4 to 5 years ago. Gus, we do have the Secretary of Culture from the city of Rio de Janeiro right here with us. So I'm sure that the state of Rio and Minas Gerais are very much interested in following those on those stories with you, and everything that you, Jurema, and Gus have talked about, when it comes to memory. We do have the College Monte Andrade Foundation here with us, people who are very much engaged in this whole matter of archives and how they may, in fact, become interactive assets for, that goes both ways. So I very much believe that research is the gateway to this conversation. And I didn't have to go to London to meet Gus. We do have the presence of the Victoria and Albert Museum on the internet. And should you require any contact information at a later time, we will make that available. Thanks again, Jurema, Gus, and Leandro. Leandro will be back in a few, but anyway. In the meantime, while we are reorganizing our structure here, we're going to go straight to the point and talk about our research here. So I believe that you have in hand this draft of our research. And I just now want to explain that now we're going to have a bit of a dynamic process here where 5 to 6 people are going to talk about what they learned from that research. And let me talk a little bit about the methodology before we begin. So with that, we began about 10 months ago, where we had 6 organizations: the Inhotim Institute, the Cosmo de Andrade Cultural Foundation, Cláudio Pano from Nova Lima, Casa Quilombe, And I knew I was going to forget the last one. Oh, the San Sebastian Band from Romadinho. The Clube de Esquina, from the Clube de Esquina, from the city of Mariana. And all of them pretty much use the same methodology where we first built an inventory over their land. So I believe that you do have that we will have that in the final report. And afterwards, we all together collaborated and created a survey, or rather a questionnaire that we're going to show you quantitative research, which was applied to about over 500 people, where they decided who to apply that research to. Therefore, we applied 5 methodologies to 6 organizations in order to produce responses from 500 people from the land, providing or adding a great value to the research. And on top of that, we did another qualitative piece of work by interviewing 2 to 3 people from each one of these different organizations. And all of that data was analyzed along with the organizations. From the Peter Spiders projects also made the final analysis, but everything in a collaborative fashion in order to produce the report. And on top of that, we also produced another report for each organization so that they could use them through their talks, their financial institutions, the public authorities, and other groups of interest, of course. And this is, of course, a great revelation. We have discovered many, many new things, but at the same time, we have discovered a new way to prove what we already knew, as it were. So in this last research, you can clearly see that the data speaks for itself, the research speaks for itself. So with that, now I'm going to invite to the stage, and of course, due to the social distancing, I'm going to invite 4 people first and 2 afterwards, and each one's going to talk about what the research revealed to them or to their organization. So now Laura from the Institute, Fred from the Traz do Pano, Juliana from Casa do Covey, and Renata from the San Sebastian Band, just to set things off. All right, Laura, over to you. Oh, by the way, how did you like the setup here? You know, it almost looks like a choreographed dance, maybe like a flash mob, as it were. Well, anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, our good friends. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to stay here. I feel quite comfortable in this spot. But anyway, the good friends we made over this 10-month-long research journey. I'd just like to share a little bit of the process here of the Unity Institute. The experience we had here in this investigation. When we built this inventory, we're thinking about which line we're going to follow, because we're talking about a museum here, which is a botanical garden, which has relations with the heritage and culture here, which is quite peculiar, if I may add. And with that, I was thinking about how we were going to do this and what kind of audience we're going to hear. Let me just remove my mask here so you can understand me better. And again, who we're going to listen to in order to better understand our actions. And from there, after really researching Qing, since we felt that we're going to need an internal look here in order to provide some additional aspects, we thought about looking at some educational centers. So with that, we interviewed or distributed a questionnaire to the youth from the Youth Protagonism Institutes, as the Qing Institute, some governmental agencies, and we also distributed that to our Qing program, the chords and orchestra school, and our internal audience, in order to understand or hear more from the people who live in the city of Romadinho, because Qing has that whole matter of receiving a lot of people from a lot of locations. And and which would make it hard for us to make that territorial assessment. That's why we chose that slice of the pie there when it comes to educational matters. And within the different aspects that we research here, I like to bring up the perception of threats to our heritage, where within the questionnaire there were several topics for people to choose from, in regards to what they felt was the greatest threat. And over 50% of the research groups, which make up about 115 people, we had a goal of reaching 100 people, and with that we were able to increase that to 115. Over 50% of them demonstrate a low interest in the understanding of the population of the threat for the continuity of the Qing Museum, which is not really surprising to me, because in a certain regard there is in fact a difficulty in that, or complexity in that perception of Qing as being a place that is part of Brumadinho, the city of Brumadinho, and Brumadinho also feeling that the museum is part of it, of the city itself. So with that, we were able to notice some other important aspects as to how we need to value our relation with the land in order for people to feel like they belong and for us to feel like we belong. Therefore, within this 15-year anniversary where we are within a specific land, I think that research does very much fit in this this segment. And also some other things have come up, such as the threat of climate change that we suffered in 2019, and the consequences are still around, if you will. We also have the lack of public finance, because Qing does have that whole matter of having receiving sponsors from the cultural incentive laws, but the public finance is still very much low when you put things on paper. And you also have environmental disasters, which were mentioned. So it's important for us to keep an eye on those two perspectives, where people reported that more as a crime than an accident. So that also came up as a relevant matter. And also, before I conclude, I'd like to thank all my colleagues, and hope to continue working with you all on this journey. Yeah, and I do agree that when you talked about this internal threat there, as well as that external threat, not just the external threats such as climate change and mining and so on, which does show up on the research, but in Qing, sometimes that little lack of interest in culture is something we need to predict and sort of prepare for as an internal attack or internal matter. And within all these different locations that we visited, all these people demonstrated a very high interest in culture, and this is something that has been stimulated on a day-to-day basis. So again, we want to try to channel that energy existing in people along with these cultural manifestations. Therefore, this perhaps is something that we've been learning with the research. So again, I think we do need to focus on that. So now let's move on to Renata from the Sebastian Band. Hey everyone, I am Renata Vilas. I'm the coordinator of the Sebastian Band for about 5 years now. And I've been playing at the band for about 20 years total. For those of you who don't know, the band is basically a musical group that involves people that play percussion and brass instruments, and we usually play traditional songs from the state of Minas Gerais. And as was clearly stated here, it's older than the city of Romadinho. And if I'm not mistaken, it will be 83. The city will celebrate its 83rd anniversary on the 17th of December, and the band just celebrated its 93rd anniversary. Now on to the research itself. In fact, the project went well beyond the research, as we had other lines or other tangents that we moved on to, and as it's a cultural and artistic group and a movement that we're very glad to participate in. But now, as far as the research goes, it was very, very well conducted through the filling of the questionnaire, which is quite flexible there, and that a lot of organizations help assemble in order to disseminate it and to share it with all of those who are bound to our organizations. And as we were putting together the questionnaire, and as we answered or filled in the questionnaires ourselves, we ended up learning or finding out several things that we ourselves had no idea existed. One of those things being the relevance of the organizations within societies and how they have been acting within their social range. So it was with great pleasure that we participated in that research, because it's only then that we were able to find out what indeed is a cultural heritage, how it is inserted within the city, how it becomes part of the history of that said city, and this could perhaps end up becoming a guideline for the future. Therefore, nowadays I consider a cultural heritage as a precious asset that we have. And specifically on the subject of the results from the Sebastian Band, well, a little of it we already expected, but as Paul himself put it, scientific data is much, much stronger because they may be proven and they're solid. So we're very happy with those. So some things I like to point out here from the research. One of the points there is mental health. We went through several things here in the city of Romadinho. We know very well that a lot of people here nowadays they're on medication in order to treat their mental health. And I don't need to talk about the San Sebastian Band in itself, but music in itself is a factor that helps minimize the consequences of mental health, and perhaps might even be the cure for several of those issues. So we were very happy to find out that the band was added to the research, because it does in fact provide a little bit of balance, as it were, to mental health. And we also have the areas of social actions, because back then, people who were musicians, they didn't have a job, and nowadays everybody knows that is a profession. A lot of the initial the first musicians that became professional band members from the military here. So we're very happy to find that people were finally becoming recognized, and the cultural heritage recognition and the feeling itself that it provides. I believe that Brumadinho may be considered a musical city. As I myself said, we are a lot of times very much bound to the mining sector. Brumadinho is the state city of mining. But yeah, that's true and all, but we need to keep an eye out for things such as arts and culture, because Minas Gerais is a very large, a very important hub of culture. Brumadinho, if you go into the Melo Franco, the countryside there, within some homes, you're going to hear, it's very quite frequently you'll hear people playing instruments, and in pretty much every corner of Romadinho, you're going to hear music. And this is a musical city, and needs to be recognized as such. And I'm very glad that it came up that way on the research. And last but not least, we have social engagement and our concerns with the environment and local matters. We have come to realize that those who participate in a musical group or band, such as the San Sebastian Band, they feel valued with a higher self-esteem, as they feel like they are able to enact change within their surroundings. Therefore, they feel empowered, which is sort of the key word of the moment here. And with that, they're able to not only feel empowered themselves, but they feel empowered to change other people's lives. So we're very much satisfied with the results of the research, and I would like to just take some time to thank the UT group for the invitation and this wonderful partnership with the PPP group, who have been working with us for these last 10 months, because they in fact demonstrated to us that we are now a bridge that has helped us lead people out of the matters or some of the accidents we were involved in, such as the great disaster of the Brumadinho dam break. Yeah, thanks very much. And we're going to still stay in Brumadinho, but we're going to sort of leave the perimeter, as it were, and move it on to our next conversation. Yes, thank you very much. I'm Jenna Janeiro, co-founder of the Quilombe House, which is found in this very large area here. Romadinho, we're mostly, to be more specific, we found a rural area in the Quilombe area, which is an arts and culture house for education and tourism on a community basis for cultural exchange by providing memories and changes. And it's very important to receive the invitation from the Yoting Village along with the PPP in order to help us think about the resilience roots and to think about this location where we can have the talks, the debates, and how important it is to talk about our heritage, be it the material, immaterial, or to talk about this strength within us and to try to mobilize what our community and our members from the house can understand the process as arts and a heritage, that it is in fact a viable economic activity that's sustainable, and to think about how we may displace ourselves from the dependency of mining, because the Iron Quadrangle in our communities and our land suffer very much from that. And with that, we can debate a little bit more of what we're talking about within our activities within the house, within the small land, and the familiar area where we may be able to expand ourselves in this dialogue in this location, to mobilize ourselves to be able to communicate and apply this research and to find the results which are very much symbolic, and a lot of them they're seen as a given to people, as was initially raised here, especially when we look at the results, and we can find that are great. For the most part, these are people who are of African descent. A lot of them are women. And to better understand this whole process, and we look at the results of about 85% of the interviewees and that who feel lack of the the works of the Columbia House's services have been interrupted, and how they feel like those are lacking. Especially when it comes to the Feijão Creek dam break, a lot of the activities were interrupted due to those matters. And with that, we switched our sort of switched our focus with the pandemic. So these are a lot of the difficulties we've been finding, and the results have shown us a lot of that. And when we look at that whole set of lessons learned from the Columbia House, this is very much symbolic and quite significant, because if you look at they learn about the cultural culture, the music, the drums, black literature, and a lot of things that we want to disseminate. So it's very important. And we tried to discuss a way forward for the project from there, as they invited us to work with this through data, because this provides us the opportunity to open up a bit more so that we can continue with these talks. And I believe that now the perceptions and threats for these interviewees is very much bound to the environmental crimes, the lack of private and public finance.
So let's talk this about very important ways with the civil society, the public power, the society, in an individual and collective way. And we have to go into this transformation, and we continue in this fight with arts, education, and resistance. Well, thank you very much, Chama. And it's too bad that Gus is not here with us, because he really likes to hear this from all of you, these issues about memory and future, this link that cultural institutions make between these 2 points. And now let's go to Nova Lima, right? Exactly. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Paul. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Behind the background group, we joined this study with much joy, feeling that being inside Nova Lima means to be inside a very symbolic area of what Minas Gerais really is. It is a city that has been deeply branded by the human disasters that mining brought about to this place in Brazil that really carries in its own name the name of Minas Gerais. But also, we as Jorema said very well, and as well as Ailton Granaki said, we also need to keep looking forward, to move on, because tragedies don't teach us much. Life is much larger than this. And the Behind the Background group, we started 40 years ago, and within a family of artists. We are here today with Eliane Nassifi, who is the sister of Miriam Nassifi. And Miriam met Paulo Tillman. They got married, and they continued working within this group that believes exactly in the culture of play. This drama group Behind the Background is a group that works essentially with arts and education. And working with arts and education, it has in arts the north, the guide to improve the lives of citizens. So throughout these 30 years, there were a number of cultural projects executed, especially in the countryside of the state, in communities, and learning what these communities value, what they have within their heritage, people, family, traditions. And based on this view, on this exchange, this drama group created about 10 years ago a project in continuity, which is called We Are Here Citizen. Exactly with this sense of finding in your neighbor's eyes, inspiration for your work. Of course, using drama techniques, theater, play, using Augusto Boal as well, and Paulo Freire and Toletas and Brazilian writers, and especially inspiring oneself in the in heritage culture that this story was all built. And with this study, with this research we ran, we had a beautiful and very moving connection of missing our public. In other words, saudade, missing the opportunity of being here today, like this today, looking at other people, looking at people's eyes, and listening to people, and talking about art and culture, and seeing one another's body language. When we saw the results from 101 people who were willing to answer this questionnaire, large, long, intense, and deep questionnaire, we found out that people really missed live performances, live presentations, that people felt touched by what they watched from the group, from the cultural workshops that these people participated. We saw that we have a group of women, a huge group of women in our public, and thankfully we continue counting on the capacity of Brazilian women, who are the ones that truly create this soul. If Brazil has a generous soul, we owe this to our indigenous ancestrals, our African ancestors, and women who are a majority and who make Brazil a better place, and a better country, that is. And we see that this public, which is is longing for in-person activities, is a group of much care, because people are still afraid of going out, of involving. Last week we had the happy surprise. I had the honor of being present at work, which is an unfolding of this Roots of Resilience, which is this very support to a local artist that the project provided with. And Lucas Fabrizio, an artist from Nova Lima, since childhood he stands out within cultural and artistic activities. He graduated as an artist, and he chose to do this work about his family, his house, his environment, and everything this family and he himself suffered and matured based on the mining culture of Nova Lima. And being there, Paul was there as well with the entire team, and we saw how much we are longing for being together to listen and to learn. And it is from within our homes that comes the biggest revelations for all of us when we see an artist like Caetano Veloso, for instance, who put his own mother on the cover of his record at a time when they were talking at the peak of the hippie movement in the France. The being outside, being out of home was the most valued thing. Caetano Veloso brought to us this idea that it is from within the home that you have your world. And Lucas talked about this in his performance of Memories, Home from Within. And he talks exactly about this. And this is the very proposal of our group, Behind the Backgrounds, which is to listen to get to the houses, to observe, to make, do a slow work, little by little, going from inside to create the cultural workshops, to gather hundreds, sometimes thousands of people on a square for a performance that talks about popular culture, the people's culture, to be close by, to be next to one another. This is what I believe personally. I have been working with arts and culture for 30 years now, and I continue believing increasingly more that only arts can help change this world. This understanding that the GDP is not what goes to the plate of food of everyone within the Buckingham Palace or here within a small community of Marinhos. What is there is not the GDP. What is there is the fruit of the work. It is the belief in day-to-day work, is to be able to withstand the tragedy that we all have inside of us, but that happiness also stems out. And what teaches us to see bliss within tragedy is arts, is music, is the theater, drama, and this is what helps us to be here today. Thank you very much, Eddie. It is incredible that for me to see that research can reveal such deep things that you managed to see and that you reflected upon. These things about family, I have to talk about it. The British culture, the system that we have of supporting art. It is very hard to see how we can have this type of wealth that you have here. Family, unit, it is the base of all this. And this is something that it is almost impossible to finance, and so we have to think how the financial aspects of it can support us and not destroy it. I have to talk about family and talk about the Pica-Pau group. We have João Oliveira, executive producer of the big Galpão group. My first contact with Galpão group, my first contact with Minas Gerais was through the Galpão group. I discovered at that point when we worked together during the 90s to come to London in the year 2000. It was a discovery of a new way of making art. So what really fascinated me in these past 2 days, researching and studying all your projects, what Grupo Galpão Group, what they do is totally linked to the same plateau, everyone being together, everyone eating from the same plate, as if if you will, having the same roots that you have, And I'm very thankful for Galpão Group. They taught me this. I feel that the past 30 years were a continuation of a trail you showed me to come here to Nova Lima and to your communities and all. Well, now let's go. Actually, I will leave Marcos for at the end because it is right at the here. We'll talk about the very beginning of our journey. Let's go to Juliana. Well, good morning, and it is hard. It is hard to express how happy I am to be here today with you. I am Gisele Alves. I represent the Oskindo Group. I will read here. I represent the Oskindo Group together with Deborah Santos and Cynthia Moreira. We participated in this entire project. The Oskindo Group is a culture point, an organization from the third sector that was created in 2008, seated in Passagem Mariana. We work with education and culture and work and entrepreneurship. The process of building this research together with the People's Palace Project through the roots of resilience was very important for the organization. It enabled us to have an action that we had been thought about for many years, but we didn't have a technical means to do it. But more than developing projects, actions, and programs in this area of education and culture, to understand the perception of the target public and the community where we are, where we operate, and to create metrics, the so dear metrics, it is paramount to strengthen the work of our organization as well as to bring changes, always seeking a connection with our public. Within and this study with the Oskindo Group, we prioritized the young, the youth and the families that are part of our actions, the youth that participated in the Young Observatory Project, parents of children who participate in our Skindoteca. So it is this group of people and people who are also part of other projects such as the Crazy for Reading project that and after that we took this research for them to answer, or the survey for them to answer. Well, among the results we obtained, reading stood up as a fundamental part to integrate and develop our actions. And this happened due to the fact that our club has a community library, the Skindoteca, a community library, and besides lending books, it brings reading as a means to create action, and through it we offer public a democratic full access to an agenda of creative and fun activities, creating a bridge to human and social development for these children, teenagers, and youth members of our community. And it is very interesting, I would say, that at about the year 2012, we saw a study. Our library, as a matter of fact, was founded in 2010 or 2009, as a matter of fact. And in the year 2012, we had access to a research from the Pro Livro Institute saying that communities that had libraries, the development index of the schools were the highest. And we knew that, but we didn't have data proving it. And in Mariana, our municipal school there is one of them that the development index, human development index, is maintaining as one of the highest in the city. And now we can, through this research, we can prove this result, this outcome. We knew about it, but we didn't have the data, the hard data to prove it. And we were very happy with it. Now, this research, this study also showed that we could be an agent to mediate knowledge on local culture, on the material, immaterial, and natural heritage of our communities that contribute to preserve cultural traditions and the very local heritage. The Oskindo Group is also considered a reference organization in the development of actions focused on culture, arts, and education. And this was reported by over 80% of the participants in the study. who miss the activities promoted here, considering the suspension, well, based on the fact that we had to suspend activities during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're still suspended, and we are coming back slowly. That's what they say here, because the activities happened daily in the Skindoteca, but for a year and a half it has been closed because of the pandemic. We obtained very positive outcomes, but research also showed that we still have a lot of challenges to be overcome, and thus strengthen our work as a bridge for the human and social development, to contribute to strengthen people who are the live heritage, and to mitigate the threats against our cultural heritage, to help develop, value, and preserve the material cultural heritage that we have, also the immaterial natural heritage of the Passagem de Mariana community, where we operate, and a community that we love so much. You know, it is a community that inspires culture. We have two civilian bands, centenary. We have a number of cultural institutions, the Oskindo group, we have Lunatica, we have the Circo Volante, we have many other groups there that are very important. And so Passagem de Mariana is very rich, I would say, in these terms, just like many other cities represented here. I wanted to invite everyone who have the opportunity, go there, visit this Skindo group. You will be very much welcome. I am sure of that, and I guarantee it. And I also wanted to thank for this opportunity of participating on the Roots of Resilience project. I can hardly say it. Oh, Roots of Resilience. And I especially thank Paul, who's been here with us. Paul was very, very important for us. And I thank you for the opportunity of being able to stop and look inwards, and seeing if what we do is moving in the right direction, to stop, look behind, see what we can change, what can be changed, to do better what is already being done. In other words, to truly build these bridges towards the development of our community that welcomed us so much, and to be able to understand the power and strengthen the strength of our resilience, our cultural resilience, which is fundamental. Thank you very much to Roots of Resilience program. I thank Inyotin for the partnership. I thank the institutions, the Behind the Background group, the Carlos Drummond de Andrade Foundation, São Sebastian Band of Brumadinho, the Quilombe House. I can't wait to go there and visit it in person. Did I forget anyone? I always forget some. Oh, Inyotin, yes. And also, I'd like to thank you for the possibility of having this exchange here, and I hope we can have this partnership forever. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Gisele. Very moving account, very moving report, and it is great to see. It's a great link with Carlos Drummond de Andrade Foundation. I left Marcos to the end because in a transition to the next panel, that will be more about public policies. And Marcos, besides being part of the foundation, he is also he works in the Secretary of Culture at the city of Itabira. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Paul, on behalf of Paul, I greet everyone here on the panel. To talk about the Carlos Drummond de Andrade Cultural Foundation is to talk about the very city of Itabira, is to talk about a city that in 1902 gave birth to the biggest poet of the Brazilian language, Carlos Drummond de Andrade, is to say that a city that in 1942 stepped up as the cradle of Brazilian mining, maybe the world mining, with a number of expertises to talk about an exploration that generates wealth, but that also brings to us a number of adverse events, social, environmental, and it is therefore necessary to unveil our eyes so that we can start perceiving even based on this research we did that was carried out with the program we have in our institution, one of the stable bodies of our foundation. Today in our foundation we have Drummondzinhos, the small Drummonds, we have Maitá, we have the choir, we have the band, the orchestra, a chamber orchestra in our institution. And when this research came up, I thought about something very important, which is how long, to what extent our eyes are veiled to our reality, our cultural reality, our environmental reality. And when we bring this research to surface, when we employ when we think about broadening this feeling of belonging and the interest in cultural practices and engagement with local issues, one of the things that this entire research brought to us is that, when people have the opportunity to participate, they will unveil their eyes and they will start to notice the rich cultural heritage that we have in our cities, and also these environmental issues, which are extremely important. But for that, we need to have an opportunity. We need to realize that there's another element that research brings about the very perception. Perception of the threats against our cultural heritage. So oftentimes, I would say, people are not really concerned by that because they are not involved, deeply involved in this process. Thus, the need to have public policies that are strong and move actions that may not depend very much on the local, state, or municipal government. It depends on this network, on this collective talking, discussing and seeking new ways, new solutions. This research brought to us these elements, and also brought to us, in the case of Itabira, a very in-depth experience. In-depth because we are talking about a city that is also the capital of poetry in Brazil. And in our work with local artists, we could notice that the game of the letters, the game of words, is one that can, yes, trigger and bring a new view to society. And I say this especially considering the work that our artist presenter Tiago Skipi, bringing light to call the attention of the entire society towards such important topics associated with our heritage and also environmental issues. Because it is very important to always be constantly discussing and bringing this to surface so that we can truly bring about meaningful social, cultural, and environmental transformation. So for us, it was a very enriching experience to participate in this project and also to understand the willingness of these young people who participate in the Drummondzinhos project to really have a new view, a new mindset from a program that has a cultural and social mindset, that has culture and poetry in its soul. Thank you, Marcos. I knew that your speech would have a huge link towards the next topic or the next panel and the last panel of this morning. So let's remake the panel, the stage. Thank you all very much. Well, actually, before, when you were leaving, I wanted to say something here, which is incredible for me. I am a professor and work in the state for over 40 years. It is incredible to hear people like you talking about a research project like this. Is something that I've never heard before. To know that the way we do research is a type of research that has to enable you to do the research, because the research you do is much better than the research we do in the universities. This is an incredible partnership. I know how much the research project of the British government, the Research Council there, I know that they finance research on arts and culture, and they will really value a lot the research you did for the state. So thank you very much. It is not easy to do research in Brazil, people. They talked about it. Thank you very much. A big hand to all of them. And now, for our last panel, we will talk about public policies, and we will actually expand once again. The second panel was what we discovered and the study, and now how we can move forward. This is the beginning. At the very beginning, we were talking about this. We will continue with the project. There will be other fruits stemming from it. So it is a great pleasure to call the next three people who will talk here. Duda Salabetti, professor of literature, environmentalist and activist, a representative of the city of Belo Horizonte, a city representative. Duda. She's in the city council. And I also call Leandro Zelli, activist from the youth forum of the metropolitan area of Belo Horizonte. And our surprise guest that we managed to bring from Rio de Janeiro to call a representative of the Culture, Secretariat of Culture of the city of Rio de Janeiro, because one of the continuities of the project for next year will be a link between Minas Gerais and Rio de Janeiro. So Rio de Janeiro will take this project forward from then on. So Igor Sebastian, we are very happy, very thankful for you to come. Igor is the manager of urban culture of the City Secretariat of Culture of the city of Rio de Janeiro. And he has this challenge that he will develop new policies within the Secretary of Culture of Rio de Janeiro to face and to discuss exactly this topic. All right, thank you guys very much.
All right, thanks once more for being here. And let us kick things off with Duda. Thank you for the invitation. Congratulations on your work. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss a subject that's so near and dear to us. And as I was introduced, I am Duda. I'm one of the council members here of the city of Belo Horizonte. I'm a literature professor. And when it comes to public policies, we, by obligation, introduce it because I believe that it needs to be one of the obligations of policy, to have, by that I mean to have environmental matters in the construction of our mandate. And to this, when it comes to matters of mining, I'm from the sector of literature, and from a long time of my background, I was reading and analyzing poems. And so, by nature, this is one of my duties. But within this whole scenario of the city here, it was sort of one of the demands of mine to discuss mining, because we can't discuss public policies here in the city of Minas Gerais without discussing policy, because data shows that about 51% of the municipalities have been or are being affected directly or indirectly by mining processes in this very state of Minas Gerais. And in order to discuss mining, one of the matters that I believe that's quite important for us to begin that debate is to say that mining is not just an economic activity, but rather it was something that was built and introduced into Minas Gerais as sort of an ideology, as it were. There's an ideology behind it, and that mining ideology is manifested within that imposition of ore. Some people call it dependency on ore, some people call it an imposition, and that ideology, again, created within the public minds, or fossilized within our minds here in the state, an idea that mining is something that's natural, and that we are within a state where mining is a vocation of the state, and that there's no discussing anything contrary to that. And this idea is very harmful, and with that we need to rediscuss that idea that the state depends very much on mining, because this ideology of mining ended up formatting the politics of Minas Gerais, the legal system of the state, our legislative branches, executive branches, and all the power structures of the same state. And if you're from the left or the right, regardless, the policies of the state of Minas Gerais was formatted by the mining ideology, which has established the idea that mining is something that's mandatory here in the state. And each one of us here in public management, I believe it's our duty to question that type of narrative, and that is done via science and research and what you are doing here. So again, let us look at that data and find out if truly we are a state that is, dependent on mining. And we also need to recall that mining in the state of Minas Gerais, if you look at the past 10 years there on average, it represents about 4% of the GDP. And we're talking about an activity that on average represents about 4% of the GDP. In its heyday, in its 10-year period, it was about 7%, but that was due to a global economy. So the average is about 4%. And we're talking about an economic activity that today represents 1.2% of the jobs in the state. We're not talking about 8, 10, or 20%. It's 1.2% of the jobs in the state of Minas Gerais. And about 2% of the taxes of the state come from that same mining process. And with that, I ask you, what is the actual need for mining, in an activity that represents only 4% of the GDP, 1.2% of our employments, and 2% of the taxes collected? So from my standpoint, it's a fallacy of this ideology that needs to be disputed and knocked down. When people say that mining generates wealth, it doesn't generate wealth. It generates poverty, if you ask me. Firstly, an economic poverty, because if you look at the data from the IBGE, the poverty rate is much higher in municipalities which had iron ore mining processes taking place. And again, I repeat, within the states that had iron ore mining, the poverty indexes are much, much higher. And history also shows that the great mining company in Barão de Cocais took place around the mid of the 19th century. And what is the state of Barão de Cocais today? Did it change anything from back in 200 years ago? No, it's pretty much the very same city. What kind of wealth did mining bring to that city? What wealth did it bring to Romadinho or Mariana, for that matter? Or even for the state? All that wealth goes abroad, overseas. And it doesn't only generate economic poverty, but also water poverty, because in the ferrous and iron aquifer, you can generate iron ore without destroying our aquifer. Aquifer, in its etymology, means water plus ore, iron ore, or the iron ore below the water. So with that, you have to destroy the aquifers which are within our water reservoirs in order to mine it. Within this whole context of water resources. So again, you generate economic poverty, water poverty, and cultural poverty, because our hills, for our Minas Gerais inhabitants, our hills are not just our heritage on a natural basis, but also a cultural heritage. The Corral, the Gandarela hillsides, or the Moeda hillsides, they all have a cultural relation to us. So again, that is the scenario we inserted in, and to further illustrate that, and by the way, this has been brought up in the Carlos Drummond de Andrade Foundation. I think Carlos Drummond synthesized well the impacts of mining within the state of Minas Gerais. If I may, I'd like to read a poem from Drummond which translates very well the scenario, where he states, "The greatest thing in the world brings my land to Germany, my land to Canada, and to Japan." And my land here is a metaphor for wealth, right? Everything being shipped abroad. And the best thing in the world being dragged by 163 locomotives moved by diesel that are coupled and steam powered, that bring my childhood, my life, and my memories. So again, they're destroying our childhood. Who here in this auditorium doesn't have an effective and cultural link or a sort of attachment to these hillsides? So again, they're not just taking ore, but they're taking our childhood, our lives, our memories. And he concludes the poem by saying that the best thing in the world, or the greatest train in the world, transports the minimum, or the smallest thing in the world, which is my heart. So what mining is taken away is just a piece of our hearts. To try to expand mining in the Coral hand side is sort of yanking a piece of the hearts of Minas Gerais residents. If you want to mine the Gondorella hillside, that's again mining a piece of your heart. And can you put a price on the effective value that we have within our hearts and our hillsides? And if you were to put a price on that, that would mean 4% of the GDP, or 1.2% of our employments, or 2% of collected taxes. Again, we need to break down that mode, that ideology, and then he wraps up the poem by saying that there goes the greatest trade in the world, which disappears and goes away, and in one day it'll never come back because there's no more land and there's no more hearts. So again, it's going to take away our hearts, and as a metaphor, that is something that keeps us alive. And what also keeps us alive? Water. What is going to be left of Itabira in about 20 years' time? After they're done, at the end of the day, they're going to go away, and what they're going to leave behind, just some dry land and no water. There's a water shortage in Itabira and in Mariana, and they're also, just to conclude my speech here, they're also going to take away our rivers. The Rio Doce, namely, which feeds thousands of lives, for 4% of the GDP, to maintain the wealth of a great multinational and the colonial sort of mindset, and this economic model requires breaking down the neo-colonial rationale and to truly value what we have in terms of wealth, be they cultural, natural, humane, or even effective, all that materialized within our hillsides and our minds that we fight for, so that the state of Minas Gerais may have a new name. They just showed me that recently, and I'd like to carry this forward as a flag, but not just as Minas Gerais, which means general mines, but the mines of the general waters. And since the word detox is now the word of the day, I'd like to sort of detox our state by demineralizing our lives and overcoming all of these scars that mining left us, and that changed the country to this new economic model. And that is our challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Professor and Visionary Duda. And I think I don't know how much time you have left this afternoon, but the poets and artists who created these works of art, I believe that's very much a reflection of what you just talked about. That it's wonderful. I'm looking at Tiago there, the great rapper. He's the one who showed me. As Drummond himself said, how, Itabira is very much within our hearts, and all of these artists who produced these projects, that's very much a mirror of what you just stated there. So thank you very, very much for your talk there. Leandro, over to you. Let's keep this ball rolling. Yeah, I forgot to hand you the microphone. I see you looking at me there, like wondering how to see. But anyway, yeah. Well, I just wanna, for the record, I just want to say that it's not fair to have me speak after Duda's wonderful speech. I'm a big fan of her. I've been following her for quite some time now. But anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to talk a little bit more here about the perspective of the Youth Forum of the city of Belo Horizonte, which is a movement that gathers a series of other movements. It's a collective of other movements, as it were. And with that, I prepared some issues here to discuss, and I was very happy to find that my speech is very much in line with what everyone else said. And the first topic that I like to bring up here is that reflection of what youth being present here, but not so much responsible for the future, especially the youth that is socially fragile and hidden away, within the ghettos. And with that, I'd like to sort of highlight the power that they have in the present, this youth that is in constant movement. Sometimes it's very hard for us to see and monitor this ever evolving exponential matter that we're trying to describe here within its present day, because within this whole, it's the whole fragility within the present, it's very hard for it to be responsible for its future. And that is where our social role comes into play, especially when it comes to social actions, in helping make that youth understand and capture or seize their potentiality within our present day. And the way we do that is by helping or enabling that youth to discover their rights by democratizing them, as it were. And we can do that in a way that's differently from what the state does, especially when it comes to the ghettos here. I myself came from a ghetto, and that is where I began my work, and that's where I've been working all my life. May I have a bottle of water, please? Yes, and that's also where I intend to... Thank you. Where I intend to continue to work throughout my life, and that's where also the forum found its momentum, so to speak, so that we may be able to help they recognize their roles with some key matters here that the state can't bring into the ghetto, such as affection and warmth, especially in the listening, because these movements may reach, or they sometimes are born within the ghetto, where sometimes they provide warnings but not so much dialogue. And we'd like to provide affection, especially where the greatest strength that reaches these places are police, through violence and strength and forcefulness, and a lot of times with a little bit of a lack of dialogue, because the state tends to just to generalize things here a bit, where we fortunately will be able to see within the ghetto other perspectives and other ways for the state to participate in that process. But to put it in a general context, to further exemplify things, the state puts within the ghetto a school. They raise that school with about, with the walls about 5 meters high, barbed wire on top of those buildings, bars on the windows, and they don't allow for anything to leave or enter that space except through their permission. And I'm talking about not only bodies but also thoughts. I currently study literature at school, and I tend to go back to schools and act upon those spaces and to discuss the teacher's role, which is a political role and a political struggle. So I want to go back to school and take up on that mantle. And I also believe that within a system we find that lack of dialogue, or that those matters are lacking, and that is why I keep my fight within these social movements, because it was through them that I was able to discover the fight for people's rights and all these other matters that, such as, for instance, the role of affection, warmth, and participation, especially the youth protagonism. I am a young black LGBT person of about 34 years of age, who currently is the manager of the youth forum of Belo Horizonte, and that youth forum has been following that youth role there, because it was born in the Federal University of Minas Gerais, an academic body within the institution that covers institutions that have racism that permeating through it. And when it discusses things in the ghetto, when it breaks its barriers of the youth forum, it goes into the ghetto. It ends up finding out that things are way crazier than they thought it would be. Sometimes they find people who are completely defenseless and in a very fragile state. and they find that they can turn that youth into a protagonist of its research, as was well put there earlier. And I love when they said that this research, if it had not been done by them, it wouldn't have the transformative power that it had. And when the forum gets to the ghetto, it does realize that, because when we talk about racism or homophobia or chauvinism, the voice that needs to be the voice that needs to speak there, it needs to be black. It can't be a heteronormative voice. And the role of the talk needs to, it's very important word in this process. I'm very happy to see that this is the way the research was done, and to see that people were talking about the different collectives that participated within this research, and how they showed that it was done this way. It wasn't something that was brought externally, but rather something that brought in affection and listening within this process. And I'd like to also conclude very quickly by saying that, I think they're already bringing it to me. It's a poem from College Ramon, where I actually got to know the poem when I found out about the research, and I found out that it has very much to do with this idea which is being conveyed at this very seminar. And naturally, I'm a poet, and I found out about a lot of these movements through poetry. And I'm from the slums and from the ghettos, and through this process I wrote a poem that talks about where I came from, the territorialization. I was born at the toe of the Rollamosa hillside, and I wrote this poem which I think that synthesizes well, or rather translates all of this data and all this research and everything else. So if I may, I'd like to convey that poem now. I follow by going through the stories, even though I may stumble, and even if I may stumble, I may get my face dirty, and I find myself at the corner signs. I'm the uncle who sells contraband cigarettes, and that sometimes may get into trouble. I'm the prescription, and one day I hope to be happy. I am the tear that runs down the bottle of an uncle of bitter spirit. I am a craft, and I live through my dreams. I'm the graffiti walls of the mutts on the streets. I'm MCs. I'm one of the poets of the square. I'm one of the ladies that came from the yard, and I survived from poets. I am the hillsides. I'm the alleyways, and I'm from the favela. And that is it. I hope that I was able to contribute to this debate. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks very much, Leandro. I myself, I was thinking to myself here that poetry would be our strong side throughout this process. But anyway, now I'm going to open the floor for our next speaker. And throughout this process, we're going to invite some youth, some ambassadors, if you will. Each organization named one young man or woman who's going to come to the stage and who's going to be our reflection, as it were. Before lunch, they're going to provide us their reflections on the process. And I think it goes very much in line with what you've been talking about there. And I'm very curious to see what they're going to show us, because I believe very much that this investment needs to be on this future. And from what you said there yourself, we need to calibrate this responsibility that we are conveying there, which is very, very much important. Igor, over to you. Well, I think I'm in trouble here because I have no poetry to provide, but maybe I can play a song, if you guys don't mind. Anyway, no problem at all. Go ahead, Igor. Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Faustino, who's the Secretary of Culture from the city of Rio de Janeiro, he invited me to be here to represent the board. I was actually overjoyed to find out that Minas is sort of my second state here. I'm from Rio de Janeiro, but I'm sort of a carioca from Minas because I played at a band here for about 15 years now, and my godparents are here for the 14 Bs, George Borges. They're all from, most of my favorite musicians from the Minas Gerais, and this very, very rich, this wealth of culture that was named here on the stage. And I knew that I was going to find something very surprising here on this day, for me to bring back to Rio as a source of inspiration. And anyway, we don't really have this major problem of a multinational mining company on the state. We do have the challenges that we have found in the Board of Culture there, as a city that is sort of split, as is the case of Rio de Janeiro. A lot of you may not know, but Rio de Janeiro is a city that has the southern zone, which is the one you see in the soap operas and the beaches and so on. And we also have another city which goes from the northern zone to the western zone, which is a Galeon airport, the Governor Island. And from then on, it's a completely different city. And from there, we got those guidelines from the secretary, who asks us to start to think about the city starting from Santa Cruz, which is the beginning of Rio de Janeiro for some, but not so much to the southern of the city. So we have really thought about this a lot. And from what I heard from the groups and collectives, we started to find this project of resilience and the strength. This is something that we started to see very strongly in each city, in each neighborhood, not only in Minas Gerais, but in Rio, but also in the entirety of Brazil. We need to sort of to regain this national narrative, that the culture is rice and beans, it's food on the table, it's the development of the neighborhood, it's the development of the land. It's not just something that's, people do willy-nilly. And with that, we have this whole work here in the city of Rio de Janeiro. We just arrived in January. We had 4 years
de falta de política
of lack
pública
of public
para cultura,
policies,
para
geared
território.
towards
E a
culture
gente
and for
começou
the
a
land. And with
desenvolver
that,
já
we
no
started
início do
to
ano
develop at the beginning of the year,
todo o orçamento da
the
cidade,
whole budget of the city on a
culturalmente
cultural
falando,
basis,
ele tem que ir agora
which
obrigatoriamente
now
para a zona
mandatorily
norte
needs
e
to
para a zona
move
oeste
towards
da
the
cidade.
northern and the
A
western
gente já
zones
encontrou
of the
algumas
city.
vezes,
As a matter of fact, we
não
have
sei se
talked,
vocês conhecem,
recently we've talked about, I don't know if you know the INSS, which is sort of
a gente colocou já
a network of markets. This year, in fact, we added
tem que ir
20%
para a zona norte, para a zona oeste.
of those that have to go to the northern and the western zone. We did a study in the beginning where almost always those who won were Alagoas, Ipanema, Botafogo, and the southern zone. So it's, and every year the northern zone had the best ideas. So it's I don't know. It just seems a little odd to me. But and with that, we started to then territorialize that cultural budget, and with that, we started to notice it via data. And again, as you yourself said there earlier, it's very important to have that data, those indicators to show to the governor, and to the mayorship, the importance of that budget to arrive in those lands. We don't have a mining company, as I said, to harm us, but we do. We do have other players there, so to speak, that make things complicated in the state of Rio de Janeiro. Let me just mention a quick example here where we started the culture zone there in Rio, which is where we're going to have that dialogue through the zone of culture when that project moves to Rio. And the culture zone precisely revolves around the culture and environment to develop the neighborhood and the land. We're going to begin working in Madureira. I don't know if you know Madureira in the ghetto, in the slums of Rio de Janeiro, where there was an explosion of cultures, and go from the slum, the samba, Portela, and the Serrano neighborhood. And with that, we started the culture zone there through Madureira. And I heard people talk quite extensively here about the GDP and how culture develops the land, the neighborhoods. And we do believe that culture, along with the environment, does in fact, or can in fact, develop not only the streets of that neighborhood, but successively we will be able to reach greater GDPs in the city. But let me just give you a quick example here to wrap up and say that I'm the cultural manager of culture in the city, and one of the orders given by our friend Marcos Faustino was the following. Look, we need to include the soccer players in the culture of the city. I don't know if you have the soccer players. We call it bate-bola in Rio de Janeiro, but in the city we have groups of people who like to play soccer who are decriminalized. People that some of them reach as high as 200 people. We then mapped out 400 different exhibitionist soccer players there, and we found the importance of those groups within the neighborhood and the creative committee that they or the things that they generate in the Santa Cruz and the neighboring areas, so the importance that they have for the families of the land. For instance, you have the arts and crafts or the tailor who makes their jerseys, the clothes that they play in. They have the people in the area that provide their food. So it's a soccer playing group that's criminalized, and with that we show the importance that they have within our neighborhood. So that's our challenge there in Rio. In other words, to show those seeds of resilience and resistance, something that you guys are providing your own indicators here, but we want to take our indicators and bring them to the city and show that culture develops wealth and generates the neighborhoods. And I like to conclude not with the poetry, but with the song of a great poet and musician that I very much admire, which goes something like this. You're probably going to know who it is because this is very famous. I'm from Latin America. I know that you're not going to know, but now I'm a cowboy. I'm from the gold, I'm from you, I'm from the world, and I'm from Minas Gerais. And don't forget to visit us back in Rio. All right, thanks very much, Igor. And by the way, it's almost criminal not to hear more from these speakers, but we need to think about the fact that lunch is a continuation of this debate. So I know that you guys are from Minas Gerais, and you can talk amongst yourselves about these matters much better than we can here in this theater, or this amphitheater. But before we hear more from our young ambassadors who are going to continue the process, a round of applause for the great speakers of this panel. Thank you very much once again. Duda. All right, now the stage is all yours.
They joined the project at about a month ago, and we are thinking about the next steps. So we thought about it is important to have a young person from each organization to listen to us today and make some reflections that will help us develop the project even further. I have no idea of what they're going to do or say here, so let's listen to them. Who will start? Good morning, everyone. I am Rafael de Sá. Thank you. I'm Rafael de Sá. I'm 23 years old. I'm from Itabira, Minas Gerais, and a city that is the cradle of a Vale mining company. And when we talk about the impact that mining cause in the environment as well as to the cultural heritage, I bring it a lot to the cultural heritage because I was formatted within a city that for me is a city that is the national capital of poetry. The city that is a cradle of Carlos Drummond de Andrade, our greatest poet, a city that has over 300 years of history. So I was formatted within this idea, but I know that unfortunately within my city I am at the margin of what most young people understand of the city. So I think it is very important, this entire debate. No, well, masks are really bothersome, right, people? Well, anyhow, for me, my city, Itabira, is this city, is the city of poetry, is the city of the mansions, the city that has a huge cultural potential, the state capital of tropeirismo. It is the city with more than 30 waterfalls that you can visit. But unfortunately, as I said, I was created for this. But this does not come to most young people, especially those like me from the ghettos of the city, and I know this is not a reality there in my city, and this really concerns me substantially and make me places me in a role of a true revolution, because it is an obligation. We young people have, as our friend here said, we young people, because we make the change now, and the pandemic brings us this now, and this brings me inside a place about a responsibility to change my means, to change my friend that goes out to have a beer with me. But he or we also have to put ourselves within this obligation. And then, since we don't have much time, because also everyone wants to have lunch and there are more people to talk here, I think that the project brings to us, with all this data that was discussed here, a new vision to our city, to Itabira. It brings a basis so that we can then work on top of it, and to discover, so that most physicians can discover that we're not only 2% of the GDP, as Duda said. We are waterfalls, we are a historical heritage, we are poetry, we are the national capital of poetry. So I'm not going to go very much in depth here. I want to yield the floor to my friends here, and I thank Paul all the work that has been developed here. Thank you, Rafael. My name is Brenda. I'm 15 years old, and I am part of the Casa Quilombé. And there is where I learned how to play an instrument. I learned I learned music, and we have there activities that value the Quilombola culture and its traditions, as fostering knowledge and also empowering those involved through arts, music, and literature. Thank you, Brenda. Good morning. I am Micaeli, and I am from Pedro Leopoldo, but I live in Nova Lima today. And I went to Nova Lima on the beginning of the pandemic. I'm a cyclist. It is very important for me to be in Nova Lima, because I've always seen bicycle as a means of transportation. For those who don't know, Pedro Leopoldo is a national reference in biking. It actually is one of the cities in Minas Gerais that most has the bicycle used as a means of transportation, not only sport. So this environmental issue is inherent to my life and my living, because it goes beyond what Rafa said. This relationship with the waterfalls is a relationship that goes hand in hand with life quality. And in addition to this, I'm a visual artist. So what I think is how we can link all these possibilities within culture and the environment, so that other areas can also be included in this process of a building. I'm a bit nervous here, kind of lost train of thought. But anyhow, I think that it is a huge issue for us, while poor people from the ghettos, which we are not used to having a space to talk, to express our minds, which is not common in our reality. So I think you can clearly see that this opening and this building going beyond we as representative to bring our community into spaces like this one, and to be able to express it here. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you behind the background for the invitation. Good morning, my name is Davison. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Mariana, and I am the coordinator of the youth in the district of Mariana. I'm a musician of the São Sebastião Music Society. I represent the Euskindo Club here. And when I was 8 years old, I participated in a presentation. Actually, in school, our school was always invited to participate. Euskindo Club is always linked to all the movements there. Schools, samba school, high schools. I'm a bit nervous here as well. But the samba club, well, but Esquindo in itself has always been linked to us and connected to all of this. And I also want to talk about. I'm sorry, I'm nervous in here. The Esquindo group has social and cultural development in mind. Esquindo Group has never stopped, has never closed its door to the community at Passagem. Not only the community there, we also serve the city of Ouro Preto and all the other regions. And what's beautiful in this is that there they have a little carnival for children, a little parade for children. This will never end because they are leaving a legacy there with the children and serving the youth with the Young Observatory Project and the Skindo Club, which is for the adults. So all the generations are connected, and culture will not end because of this, because it's moving on from one generation to another. Good morning. My name is Samantha. I'm 22 years old. I'm here from Romadinho, and I am part of the Banco São Sebastião, Banda São Sebastião Corporation. I was actually raised there, as a matter of fact. And we were outside there talking, and we talked a lot about all the panels that we were held here and how all of them talked about the importance of culture and the environment. Now, talking about my own experience in the band, we learn a lot about the importance of the collective, that one person cannot make a miracle, but a group slowly would make a huge difference. Do this talk. I will not lie, I was really excited about it. Thiago was next to me, and he kind of held me because I wanted to cry and scream, because it is really branding how mining became a tradition to all of us. It is a tradition that I was born inside it. There is a music in Brumadinho say how beautiful were the waters of Paraopeba River. I was born in 1999, and for what I remember, the waters have always been dirty because of the mining here. And it is incredible how I'm 22 years old now, and to face mining and the environmental impact that human beings caused, the reduction we are breaking the mountain around us, and how much the culture and the music gave me strength to be here in front of you talking, because otherwise I'd be the shyest person in the world. I would not have the courage to speak my mind, afraid of being judged. And this is what we mean to say here. We are ambassadors. We have been called to be ambassadors because we want to give voice not only to our institutions and cities, but we want to give voice to the youth that is afraid of saying something, but they have something to say, and we want to be able to hear and help through all our experience, everything we learn from culture and everything else we want to learn. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Lucas, we have great ambassadors here, right? Well, guys, thank you very much, the speakers, everyone who talked here this morning. This afternoon, it will be more of arts. We'll see the same topics, questions, discussions, and answers, and provocations, everything through the art work that was developed. And thank you very, very much. Now it is time to have lunch. Thank you.
Então, todo mundo vai junto para o restaurante. Não esquecer, se você tem comentários para deixar lá nos post-its e tudo. E vai ter mais oportunidade de falar hoje à tarde. Laura, você quer que todo mundo vá junto para... mas distanciados.